Am I on slide 1?
It says custom.
Okay. All right, guys. Sorry about that. So yeah, a bit of background about me. I'm with D'Souza Homes and Akibo Construction. We built, we spec, we primarily build custom homes. We've done some spec builds, but generally custom builds in Durham region. We also have a renovation and addition division, Akibo Construction, where we primarily do renos, bathrooms, kitchens, additions, and full main floor renos. We've been getting a lot of calls for renovations right now because of just land has been so hard. It's very expensive right now. So they kind of go hand in hand, the custom building and the renovation side of things. So I'm going to go through the home building side and kind of give everybody a brief introduction of what it takes to build a house and the process of building a house. And then we can even discuss pros and cons of building or renovating. So I think this would be good for your clients to kind of understand the differences. But we're going to dive in and discuss the custom home building process. So things to consider when building a home, a few different factors, location, lot, planning and design, applications, building details, and then your after build responsibilities. So obviously you guys, everyone's a real estate agent, so their location is a huge factor. But we'll dive into some of those details and discuss other details that contribute to what to consider. So key factors here are your city, nearby amenities, conservation, lot obstructions, street, hydro poles, services, trees. So when you're looking for a lot, these are the things that you kind of have to take into account. And while I'm going through this process, this is generally our process. I mean, other builders are going to have a different process. Us being a custom builder, we're a bit different than your traditional tract builder or spec builder. So for the most part, we're dealing with a client, and or we have a client in mind for a particular build. So when we're looking for the specific property, we kind of fine tune these their wants and needs, and we take that all into account. But I'll just go through it and we can elaborate on that. So your lot, things that would come into play would be conservation. So whenever you're looking at a lot, you gotta understand, is it back onto conservation? Does it touch any? Does it have forestry on it? Because that would kind of hinge on what you can build, whether you're dealing with CLOCA or Toronto Conservation Authority or other conservation authorities. Does a lot, is it serviced? So vacant land opposed to property with a house already built on it, does it have services? So these are the things to look for, like water, sanitary, hydro, gas. So these would be expenses that your client would have to incur. The size of the lot. So depending on what your client wants to build, zoning restrictions kind of limit what you can build unless you go for variances and things like that. So you want to make sure you have a decent sized lot. Lot grading, reverse grade, flat ground. So that would play a role in what you're able to build as well. So if you're on something like a flatter lot, you have a bit more play and a bit more options with your build. If you're reverse grade, you got some nice options for walkouts or raised bungalows. So those would be other things to consider. Contamination. So we've dealt with projects where the soils actually had to be removed because if it was in a property where it had a leaking oil tank or other contaminants, the soil would have to be tested and removed, and then engineered fill would have to be brought in. So that would be something that some due diligence. I mean, it's kind of premature, but I mean, it would be something that you'd have to consider if, depending where it was, like if, especially if there's a buried oil tank, access to the property. Does it have a drive? Is it a vacant lot that has no road to it? Is it fully treed? So having access to the property. And then my next point, trees. So certain municipalities, there's a fee for taking down trees, especially in Toronto. So if you're taking down a tree, you either have to plant more trees in lieu of that tree, or there would be a fee associated with that. So that's something to consider as well. And then the soil conditions. So depending on what soil conditions you have, if it's sand, clay, that would affect the build as well. The next topic would be planning and design. So your site plan and topographical surveys would be something that would be your kind of starting point. So whether you have an existing survey on file, or the client has an existing survey, or you can get a survey from the municipality, or you have a surveying company stake the property and get you a survey, just to know your property limits and exactly what you're dealing with. Now, there's two types of surveys. You can get a regular survey site plan that just shows your property limits and any structures on the property, or you can actually request a topographical, which in most cases we always request, and that will give you the grading points. So that would aid in doing your architectural drawings, because it would have all your points of elevation. Zoning would probably be actually even more important than the site plan, but zoning is probably your best starting point. So contacting the municipality and the building departments and getting your zoning for the property, because depending on what it's zoned for, if it's residential, if it has, depending on the coverage, that would kind of be your starting point before you invested into your architectural plans and topographical surveys and mechanical and so on. Soil testing. So depending on what soil you have on the property, a lot of times you would have to get it tested to make sure it's adequate to support foundations and new loads. Architectural drawings for the home, mechanical. So that'd be your HVAC, electrical, truss and structural engineering plans. Then you get into interior design and space planning, where you can work with an interior designer or an interior decorator. And then material planning and finishing. Now, I'm going to mention that all of these items here would be if you went to a builder, like I would say ourselves, these would be things that we would aid in or could take care of. So depending on if you're trying to build it yourself, or you actually reach out to a registered Tarion builder, this would be your starting point. So they would help you with the site plan, surveying, zoning, architectural drawings, and so on. And next point here is the permit applications. So prior to even submitting permits to the city, you would actually get a permit from Clocar Conservation. They're kind of they give you the green light on what you can and cannot do, and Heritage. So depending on where the property is, if it's a century home, Heritage has they have a lot of control. After that, you would go to get your service permits from the region, any variances. So if your property was, let's say, a 20% lot coverage, and you were expecting to build something 30 or 40%, that's the time that you go for variances. Development charges. that would be paid at permit application. Development fee, demolition fees, if applicable. So if you have an existing dwelling on the property and you're building a new home, a demolition fee would be incurred. So, and the house would have to be taken down prior to getting occupancy on the new structure. And then permit fees that would be paid to the municipality. And then any miscellaneous deposits, so grading, sidewalk, curb cuts, etc. Now we're getting into the house build. So once your permits are approved and you have your permit drawings, you actually start the build. So on average, the house build is 8 to 12 months. That's typically what we're seeing and what we're building. You can build, it can take a lot longer than that, depending on the size of the home and the finishes. But on average, 8 to 12 months is kind of our targeted time. The first thing we would be doing is your site preparation and clearing. So if it's a vacant site, just clearing the trees or clearing the land, getting it prepped for a foundation, or removing an existing dwelling. So in this picture, we have a house that we tore down, and basically taking it down, including the foundation. Your excavation would be next. So we would excavate the property where the proposed foundation is going. Septic and well. So depending on if you're in a rural setting or if you don't have services, septic and well would be can be dug and installed at this point. And then connections to services is if not already serviced. So connecting to sanitary and water. Footings and foundations. So that would be after everything's connected, you have your services, we would start your forming of your footings and foundations. Backfilling. So after your footings are in, we backfill and get it ready for framing. Once your framing is complete, we get your structure kind of watertight, so get your roof on. We call it capping off of the house. So then even going into, say, a winter month or the winter months, as long as your foundation is in, like we used to target prior to December, but we've had some mild winters where we'd actually been able to dig well into January and get the foundation in and backfill, and then have it all capped in by February, and then continue on with the build. So weather does have a big part in the foundation work. The other thing is there's half load seasons. So while we're doing concrete and a lot of excavation, I think they remove it every year is a bit different. It changes week to week, but it's around May, the first week of May, where they release half load seasons. So your trucks can, until May 1st, they can't drive with a full load. So trucking gets a bit expensive if you're building in the winter, and then your heating and cooling costs as well. So we always try to cap a home prior to January, just so we can have it closed in and then finish it off through the winter, if that's the way that the schedule is with the specific client. After your roofing, windows and doors, and exterior finishes, then we move on to the interior of the home: plumbing, electrical, and mechanical systems. Insulation. So in this particular picture, it's showing a spray foam insulation, which we're doing quite a lot of now. It's just it's a far superior product. Doesn't allow for any gaps, and it eliminates the use of a vapor barrier. Plus, it gives you a stronger wall and more R value, more insulation. drywall, sanding, taping, your stairs, interior stairs, and flooring. And with flooring, we're seeing a lot of pre-engineered hardwood, and that's typically what we're doing now throughout main floors. Great product, tile, a heated tile. This photo, that's just showing a Ditra tile underlay with the Ditra heat cable that runs through it. So for bathrooms or any tile areas, it's a great product. Interior trim. And then we get into our millwork, so cabinetry, countertops, vanities, paint, fixtures, and appliances, and then our cleanup. So when you're working with a builder or an interior decorator or designer, or you're doing it yourself, I mean, this is where you're doing your appliance packages, your lighting, things like that, just the exterior finishes. And then our final grading and landscaping. Now, a lot of times when we're building custom homes, we do include for the full package, or we're doing landscaping as well. So at that point, like depending on what the landscape design entailed, if we're doing a pool, like in this photo, a lot of times a pool or exterior landscaping would kind of be done simultaneously with the build of the house. Especially for running electrical, plumbing, if it's a concrete pool, like this photo has a cabana with a kitchen. So when we're running services, we're trying to do it simultaneously with the build. So your build is complete. These are some of your after build responsibilities. So inspections with the city. Inspections are also done simultaneously through the build as well. You'd have your foundation, your rough-ins, framing, insulation. So there's about 10 inspections throughout the course of the build through the municipality. Taxes, I mean, this would be, depending on what your build is, but I mean, your tax, you have to take that into account as well. So if we're building a 3,000-4,000 square foot home, you expect a large tax bill. Running costs, depending what type of build it is. I mean, if it's usually larger homes, I mean, they're going to have higher running costs. But there has been cases where we've seen a lot of net zero homes now come into Durham and across the province. So lower running costs because they're using energy efficient materials and systems. And then your maintenance costs. So just maintenance on the home and upkeep, general upkeep. So your windows, your roof, your mechanical systems. There's some general upkeep with depending on the custom home you're building. So that basically wraps up the process of building a custom home. I was kind of brief with the process, and that's typically how we build homes. But again, it's not speaking for tract build or subdivision homes. Their process is going to be a bit different than ours. Yeah, I open the floor for any questions, and I'd be happy to answer.
Dominic.
Yes.
This is Siobhan Kenny from Coldwell Banker RMR. I have a couple of questions actually. In a situation where you are buying a lot, or does this happen where you purchase the lot and build the house and then sell the house and lot to your client? Does that ever happen?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Okay.
we've had clients that have come to us that they have no idea what they want, but they want a lot. They want a specific size lot. They want a home, and we have some inventory where kind of scattered throughout the generally Whitby, I would say. that we would give them the full package. But then we also have clients that they have a lot and they want a design and they want to build.
Okay. Do you advise that that client should meet with you prior to purchasing their lot? Because I've had a situation where what the client actually wanted, they couldn't necessarily do with their lot. It had to do with grading and so on.
Yeah.
Because
I'd
that's
always say, oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, I just said that seems to be an issue where I'm sort of saying, let's find a builder first and see if you can have what's in your mind's eye before we actually put in an offer on this property.
I'd always say like do due diligence, like reach out to the local municipality and the planning department and find out what the zoning is, and then just do a bit of background work before finding a builder. But because a lot of times, especially now in today's market, there's not enough time to do all that due diligence and then put an offer on a house and then purchase the property or bring a builder in. So, or unless it's contingent on an inspection, but at that point, you know, that could be, you know, a couple weeks time. So I would recommend, if you have the time, yeah, definitely introducing a builder into the picture and then getting their insight on it, because we'd be able to look at the property or look at the zoning and dictate whether or not what can be built relatively quickly, opposed to buying something and then finding out later that, yeah, you can't build anything. Right.
So usually I do that due diligence on the zoning and so on, and what kind of coverage they can get. It's more them going out and buying something on their own that's on a hill and they want a bungalow and they can't get what they want. But the other thing too is, can you just speak a little bit to land transfer tax? Because when someone buys a lot, they also have to estimate the house cost, and they have to submit the estimated land transfer tax, not just on the lot price, but also on the potential build if it's within, you know, X number of years.
Yeah, that's right. So that would be something that I'd actually I'll get back to you on that. I'm going to leave my contact info. You guys can actually send me our office info, any questions, and we'll get back to you on that. Just because I know that a lot of people have questions about like fees, land transfer, development charges. So I want to give some specific answers to those questions.
Okay, and just one other thing, in terms of rural residential development on a lot and wells, can you just speak to some issues that can arise with regard to finding a well and drilling a well?
So we've had issues where we've built on rural properties and the well, depending on the type of well, if it's a drilled well or a dug well, a lot of times we're replacing dug wells. And depending on what you're building, most municipalities, they require you to put a new well in to properly accommodate the new home. But what we found was decommissioning an existing well, which had great water pressure, and basically re-drilling it in very similar location, not being able to find the same pressure. So it's like hit and miss. It's wells are a different animal, but a lot of rural properties have them. So well, I'd always recommend getting them tested prior to getting the water pressure tested prior to putting in an offer on, depending on what you want to do.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great, Dominic. Thank you very much, and thanks for the questions. So if anybody has further questions of Dominic, Dominic will leave his contact information. You can source it through Drawer, or we'll make sure that there's a connection. Thanks, Dominic. We'll move on to Stacy Hawkins. Stacy joined the Durham Region Home Builders Association team as EO in 2017. And Stacy manages and leads the government relations and advocacy work that the association performs. There's been a lot of modernization since Stacy has joined the team, changing up member events, advocacy work, revising bylaws, etc. So I'll let Stacy speak more about her role, and thank you very much for joining us, Stacy.
Thank you. And I feel like that photo will remind me that I should always answer Darlene's emails promptly. So there's that. So my name is Stacy Hawkins. I'm the executive officer of the Durham Region Home Builders Association. I have two giant topics that I'm going to try to cover in a very small amount of time. Each of these topics I could probably do a whole day on. So I am just going to do a very high level general overview. And I am available afterwards to answer any questions that you may have, because there may be a lot because of how generic this is going to be. So we're going to start with development charges. You may have heard of these, and you may also have heard the saying, growth needs to pay for growth. And that's what development charges are for, is supposed to be, all of the new residents and new homes are paying for the additional infrastructure that's needed to accommodate them. So that could be things like they'll need, if there's enough new houses, they may need a new fire station or a new fire truck, or they need additional parks. They may need to widen existing roads. Like, for example, they may need to take Taunton Road from 2 lanes to 3 lanes to accommodate the additional traffic that these new residents will bring when they move in. So basically, that's what a development charge is. It's designed to help growth pay for growth. Sometimes there are special areas that have a further development charge. You'll see that in Seton and Pickering. DCs are typically reviewed every 5 years. It's never longer. The bylaw only lasts for 5 years. Some municipalities will do it early, or they may amend them halfway through the 5 years. But what we find is that every time they renew them, the costs always increase. They never go down, they always go up, and sometimes that cost increase is pretty dramatic. So who are development charges paid to? So they are paid to the upper tier municipality, which in this case is the region of Durham. The lower tier municipality, so that would be, Oshawa, Whitby, Pickering, Ajax, Clarington, etc. And then an educational development charge is also paid to both the public and Catholic school boards. So I've given you a breakdown. This is for the region, so you can see where the development charge money is allocated. So at the regional level, the development charges are used to pay for regional roads, GO Transit, regional transit, police services, long-term care, paramedic services, health and social services, housing services, development-related studies, as well as water supply and sanitary sewage. So you can see at the bottom here that currently the Durham region development charge is $33,693 for a single or semi-detached home. On the local level, this is an example of where those dollars are allocated. So this is for Clarington. So you can see that it goes into roads, fire, parks and rec, libraries, and growth studies. So Clarington just updated their development charges, and theirs are now $21,461 per single or semi-detached dwelling. So I've now, this chart I put together to show you what the development charges are across the region. You can see the breakdown for the local portion, the region, and the school boards, plus the total along the right-hand side here. And as you can see, they do add up pretty quick, right? It can add up to be a significant amount of money. I want to make note of Whitby. Whitby is currently reviewing their DC bylaw. They are doing it a year early. They were at about $24,000. They did, the initial proposed fee that they came out with was almost double that. It was a little over $40,000. Through work we've done, we've got them to reduce it by about $4,000, but you can see down here is still significant. And then the total, so just the development charges, if you're going to build in Whitby, will be $77,000. So, I hear a lot of like, well, houses used to cost $200,000. What's going on out there? Well, this is part of it, right? So you're paying $77,000. You have not bought the land. You have not bought a piece of wood. You have not hired a single trade, and you're already, close to $100,000 into it. So. There's that. So when when a municipality or the region starts to review their development charge bylaws, these are some things that we look into. One is the benefit to existing. Municipalities will apply a percentage from 0 to 100 based on the projects and how much it'll benefit the existing residents. So for example, let's say that they do put in a new fire station, but that fire station is going to service an existing neighborhood, then that's a benefit to existing. So they would have to apply that percentage, which would bring the development charge down a little bit. We also look at levels of service because a municipality cannot use development charges to improve the level of service that's available to residents, because it wouldn't be fair that the new residents get all kinds of new fun, shiny things and the existing residents do not. We also look at the post-period benefit. So for example, when development charges are used to build a new fire station, or they're used to add a lane of traffic onto a road, those things don't disappear after the 10-year forecast period. They don't just disintegrate. So they will continue to be valuable for years to come. So they have to assign a post-period benefit to those projects that is then also taken out of the development charge. And that's, so I've kind of flown through the development charges at the end. If you've got questions, I'm happy to answer them. But as you can see from that chart that I showed you there, they do keep going up, and it's, adding some significant costs to new builds. So now I'm going to move on to green standards. So this is something that's kind of relatively new in the Durham region, but it's catching on like wildfire. A lot of municipalities have declared a climate change emergency and are looking towards creating these green standard or green programs for residential construction. Whitby was the first out of the gate. They have created their Whitby Green Standard and have already implemented it, and the region of Durham is currently talking about it at the committee level and has their staff looking into it. So the Whitby Green Standards, it's a tiered program. There are 4 tiers. Tier 1 was made mandatory in September, and the plan is to make an additional tier mandatory every 4 years. The standards are, essentially there's 2 Excel spreadsheets. One is a site plan application checklist, and one is a draft plan of subdivision checklist. So the builder developers have to go through those and make sure that they are going to meet all of the criteria that Whitby is asking for before they will get approval. So the Durham Region Home Builders Association and the building industry have some pretty serious concerns about the Whitby Green Standards and any kind of similar green programs that municipalities are considering to mandate. Some of the criteria in Tier 1 and the other 3 tiers, they mandate building above the Ontario Building Code. So this is of concern for a couple of reasons. So one, it's DRHBA's belief, and we do have a legal opinion supporting this, that municipalities do not have the authority to mandate above the building code. And this is important because right now, like the building officials will not inspect anything over code. So that puts the homeowners at risk. It also introduces, if more municipalities put in these green standards, it introduces a patchwork. So instead of everybody building kind of to the same level across the province, every municipality is going to have different standards. So if you're building in Whitby, you have to build this way. If you're building in Pickering, you have to build this way. If you're building in Oshawa, it's this way. And actually, the Ontario Building Code was actually created to eliminate that patchwork of standards. So it seems like they're kind of taking a step backwards. And just so for an example, in Tier 1, Whitby tried to mandate that all homes built in Whitby would have to achieve at least Energy Star or R2000 standards. We did fight back on that, and so that's now preferred. The problem is each of the tiers are more stringent. And by the time you get to Tier 4, they are mandating that all builders build to net zero. It's not just the building portion. The Whitby Green Standards also have a lot of regulations and criteria regarding land development. Some of these can get pretty expensive. For example, what they want to do with parkland. So right now, the province dictates how much parkland must be donated by the builder developer to create parks and green spaces and things like that. So Whitby again is trying to go above and beyond, which again we don't think is legal. But it also can add, oh dear, what have I done here? I've lost my, where did we go? Here we go. Sorry about that, guys. Trying to get something else off my screen. Here we go. Okay, so yeah, so when you're adding this much part, especially with what land costs are nowadays, when you're now going to require builders and developers to donate this much more parkland, it may actually get to a point where the projects are no longer viable for builders, and they just can't do it. They won't make any profits, so they're not going to bother. So this is a huge problem. There's other some issues in the land development part of it. I think at tier 3 or 4, they're mandating that homeowners cannot use any potable water for their landscaping. So that's difficult because we don't know how a builder is supposed to control whether or not a homeowner is watering their lawn, washing their car, or giving their dog, hose down in the driveway. So there's things like that too, where it's very difficult for, essentially impossible for a builder to enforce. There's also things they want put in yards to kind of help with drainage, which is great on the surface until the homeowner puts in a pool, puts in a deck, does some landscaping, and everything, goes out the window on that. So the impacts on affordability. So municipalities have not performed costing, so they actually have no idea what the impact is going to be on affordability. We've had some kind of internal quick conversations, talking to some builders and some developers about what this impact could be, and we are looking at potentially tens of thousands of dollars added to the cost of a home. And there is some debate about whether they get that back in saved energy costs or not, or if it takes, hundreds of years to actually, make up that difference. And so if that's worthwhile. Another issue is, and it's not even the building or land development part, it's the infrastructure part. So there is a builder, they're called Timberworks. They build custom homes, but they recently did 15 homes to full net zero, which requires solar panels on the roof. And as a result, they had to pay Hydro $24,000 per home, so that Hydro would be able to upgrade their own infrastructure to handle the energy coming back to the grid from the solar panels. So, I mean, that's just one thing, from Hydro is, you're adding $24,000 to the cost of a single home. We also believe that you can't fast forward the process, and it can be, expensive and potentially dangerous for homeowners to mandate these types of things before the building industry is ready. So right now, the materials to build to net zero are not mass produced and they're expensive. So I think if you can compare that to when flat screen TVs came out, when they first came out, a 30-inch flat screen TV was thousands of dollars, right? And now you can get one for probably a couple $100. And so it's the same with these. Right now, the low load furnace that is required for a net zero home is only manufactured by one manufacturer in Canada. So you can imagine that they don't have a huge supply. And then since there's no competition, it's probably, not super cost effective at this point. The other issue is that trades do not have the training on the new tech and building techniques. Some might, some might not. A lot of this is still relatively new and they haven't had time to get caught up on all of this. So that is an issue when you're having them build houses. As I'd mentioned previously, Hydro's infrastructure is not ready for subdivisions with solar panels. Right now, if you're building a one-off, you might see in your own neighborhood that there's a house here or a house there with solar panels. That's one thing. You build a subdivision with 300, 500, 700 houses in it that all have solar panels. Hydro is not ready for that. They don't have the infrastructure to take that energy back onto the grid. We also need to worry about unintended consequences. So back in the 1970s, they thought it would be a fantastic idea to start putting insulation in attics, which, yes, obviously sounds like a great idea, right? You don't want all the heat going out the roof and, that kind of thing. So government came out with all kinds of programs and incentives. And so people stuffed all of their attics with insulation. The problem is they didn't vent it. So that created attic rain. It was actually raining in people's attics, which then, caused everything to get wet, which then caused black mold. So you can imagine that is not a great, it was what seemed like a great idea had these unintended consequences that were really, really bad. And so that we're still working out, the building industry is still working out all of these things for the net zero housing to find out if there is unintended consequences and how to mitigate those. So in speaking to builders who have been building to net zero, one big problem they've run into is that they're using these solar heat gain windows to increase the amount of heat that's coming in the winter from the sun to reduce, heating loads. The problem is that they're working too well. And so some of their homeowners are having to turn on their air conditioning in January because their houses are so hot from these windows. There's also a lot of concern about how tight these houses are. They're sealed up so well that there is concern about where water goes. So, they're still working on that to figure out how they can kind of keep it nice and tight and sealed without causing, water or mold, without negatively impacting the indoor air quality and the comfort of the homeowners. So how is the building industry going to get there? Preferably not through mandated things at municipal levels. The National Building Code is actually working on a step code to help builders and trades and everybody involved in the industry get there in an appropriate amount of time and with time to prepare for what's coming next. So here we're at tier 1. If a builder is building to Energy Star, they would already be at tier 3. And then by tier 5, they would be at net zero. I believe they're aiming to have this for 2032, 2034. I don't know if they're going to make it just based on kind of what people are finding now and still trying to figure out those unintended consequences. What is important to note is that compared to homes built in the early 2000s, today's homes are nearly 50% more efficient. And that's compared to houses built in the early 2000s. So imagine how much more efficient they are than houses that were built in the 80s, 70s, 50s, 40s, et cetera, et cetera. And then, so we get to the politics of green. So, climate change and building green and all of that is like a political hot potato. I believe that councillors, have good intentions. They really, when they're voting yes to these programs and voting yes to mandate these things, I think they really think they're doing the right thing, that they're trying to stop climate change. They're trying to, make things more efficient and more green. But the problem is they don't understand kind of the other side of it and what it actually takes for the building industry to get there. I don't blame them for that either, because as a councillor, you can't know everything about everything, but it is important. Sometimes we hear it's like, oh, well, the building industry, they don't believe in climate change or they want to watch the world burn. And that's not the case at all. That is absolutely not the case. We are very much, supportive of green building, but we just want to make sure it's done properly so that we're not paying, ridiculous amounts of money for it, and to make sure, most importantly, to make sure that these houses are safe for the homeowners and that they will stand the test of time and homeowners are not moving into something that's going to be a disaster. So we're really hoping that municipalities will work with the building industry to create kind of voluntary and incentivized programs to help kind of get more and more builders on board and getting, moving towards these greener homes. And so that's all I have for that. I know it was kind of really quick and really high level, but I am open to questions if anybody has any. Not everybody at once.
Thank you, Stacy. I have a question. Do you have on your website, do you have all the development charges posted across the Durham region?
No, we could. It's just they change so rapidly, right? Like it's like every year one of them is doing it. But yeah, that is something that we should probably put up there just so that it's a quick handy guide for people to see.
So no other questions. Wow, that was a lot of information, Stacy.
Maybe I put them all to sleep with that.
No, I don't think so. There was a lot to digest. It was fascinating. And I think it's going to lead to higher house prices, just my own opinion. But
Chris, sorry, it's Siobhan. I just have one question about the development charges.
Sorry, Siobhan, I was just in the middle of something.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. So I would assume, Stacy, I want your opinion on this, that if development charges go up significantly, which they always do, that has an adverse effect on affordability, of course, right? So where do you see going in terms of resale housing and new housing as well, because one kind of follows the other.
I was gonna say, you guys may be better to answer that question, but but it does seem like one follows the other. And the other thing, I mean, the thing you have to consider too is that these developers have to pay the development charges at the time of building permit. So, for a lot of them, they have to finance that. So, like for round numbers, let's say the development charge is $75,000. They pay that, but they're financing it. So now there's these finance fees and interest and all the rest of it. And ultimately, all of these fees are getting passed on to the homeowner, right? And by the time that gets to them, it's not 75,000 anymore. It could be 80, 85, 90, by the time you take into account all of the financing fees. And that's it. We've actually pushed for municipalities to defer development charges to occupancy, to try to eliminate those finance charges and interest. You know what I mean? So that by the time the homeowner is paying the builder can then turn around and pay the municipality, and everybody's happy. We haven't had much success in that regard, but I think it's just they're just going to keep going up. I mean, you can look at development charges in like Markham and Vaughan and those areas, and they're well north of $100,000.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, is how do we compare to areas west and north?
Well, I mean, we're doing well so far. I think part of that too is, like, I mean, especially if you look at Clarington, Clarington's been able to keep their development charges relatively low, just based on how much building they're expecting to do. So they're really going off the quantity, instead of maybe, Whitby, they might be doing, building 1,000 houses. Clarington may be looking at building 25,000 houses, right? So they're able to kind of keep the cost down based on, just the quantity itself. So
right.
They're still relatively low, but they are, I mean, like I said, Whitby is looking at doubling theirs, and, so they are creeping up there pretty quick.
Siobhan, you had a question?
Sorry, thank you, Chris. Stacy answered it. It was about when those DCs have to be paid. Thank you.
Wonderful. And we have a question in the chat. Darlene, are we going to post these presentations? Are they going to be available?
Yes,
Yeah, I can send mine over. I haven't yet, but I can send it over.
and I will post them on Realtor Link under courses and training so people can view them.
And I see Scott in the chat has said that I believe costs can be found at the municipality website. And that's true. Part of it's a bit of a pain in the butt though, because they'll tell you, well, this is what Oshawa is. And then you have to go to the region and find out what the region is. And then you have to go to the school board and find out theirs, and then the Catholic school board. So yeah, when I send it, I can send Darlene my presentation so you guys can see what that chart is. They should be all up to date for now, except for Whitby, which will be changing in the next 2 months.
Fantastic. Well, if there's no other questions, Stacy, you mentioned you wanted to stick around. I guess if you still want to do that, that's up to you. But I want to thank you both. These were excellent presentations, very, very informative, and I think this information is going to be beneficial to all our members. And thank you to our DRAR members and guests for participating, and your ongoing support of the commercial network. I really appreciate it. And Darlene and Wendy and the whole DRAR staff, thank you for presenting this. All the best, everyone, for 2021. Be well, stay safe. And now we'll do the, Darlene, you want to take it away for the restaurant gift cards?
Okay,
Chris,
so we have two
Chris?
draws.
Sorry, Chris, before we do the draw, we did have another question for Dominic in the chat. And
Dominic
has a significant impact of lumber.
Sorry, I'm just, can you repeat that, darling?
Has a significant impact being felt as of yet with the tripling of lumber, etc.
Oh, yes, yeah. We're experiencing that right now. We priced 2 homes we're doing in Whitby last year, fixed price for a client, and our lumber prices went up 30 grand on 2 semis. So that was a cost we had to incur, but we're not really seeing anything stabilize as of yet. But it's not just lumber; it's everything. It's it's a trickle effect. Now lumber's kind of when you go into Home Depot, you see it's price of a 2x4, that kind of sticks out because it's tripled, but it's everything across the board. It's tile and it's also supply. So it's definitely harder to get materials, and it does, it is costing more to build.
Thanks, Dominic. Sorry, Darlene, go ahead now.
That's fine, Wendy. So the first one, the draw that we will do will be for shrimp cocktail. It is a $50 gift certificate. Everybody can see I have them in the box. And the winner is Elizabeth Castor. Elizabeth, are you on the Zoom meeting?
Yes, I am. Yay.
I will contact you and we'll make arrangements for delivery.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And the next one we will do is be for wildfire. And Danielle Rodriguez, are you here, Danielle? Oh, I see a hand up. Nope.
She says she's here.
Danielle, if you're,
She was just in
Okay.
the chat.
okay, super. So I will contact you and make arrangements for that delivery as well.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Dominic and Stacy, again, thank you for taking part in this. It was fantastic information. Really appreciate it. And everyone, enjoy the rest of the year. Work hard and stay safe. And we'll see you at the next Commercial Network presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Kurt.